presenting proposal 1028, and we will be presenting proposals 10 and 12. We will have private caucus, and then we'll come back to see what we're going to bring back.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
we're gonna start with safety and health today. First, we do have to say the last session, what we did as a team was attempt to run towards the district's position, specifically on compensation in the interest of a settlement. We absolutely want to settle a fair contract for our members' working conditions and compensation and benefits. So in an interest of a settlement, we really did just decide, okay, we're gonna run to the district's position and try to settle this contract as quickly as possible. Found that you did, what the district did was not on safety and health, was not run to our position, was not even walk to our position, was barely make any steps towards our position or addressing the very real concerns that we have in that article, the problems that our members face on the ground. And that was really disheartening for us. So if what the district wants to do today is settle, we are here for it. We really do want to settle. And we are going to be very willing to settle and settle today. But we really, in order to do that, we have to collaboratively address some of the problems that our members are facing on the ground in order to get that done.
Yeah, several sessions ago, we were asked for priorities, financial priorities and otherwise. This is it. Safety and health, this is it. Apart from financial priorities, this is our biggest priority as a bargaining unit. And so we urge your team to take that seriously today. We are hoping for a settlement today. Please work with us. Please go through this carefully and return a real proposal to us today because we want to work together. We want to settle this. So, and we've worked hard to put together a proposal, a return proposal for you today. Hannah, you have both of these, I'll check. So starting with A3. Let me go back to do our last.
Yeah, so one place where your team had made a little bit of movement, we had proposed a fairly robust A3. You had kind of moved some of that into A1. And we do appreciate the even small amount of work you did there, though, you know, we didn't really feel like our members being granted the ability to request a meeting was very much in addressing our concerns in that they can currently request a meeting.
Yeah, and part of the discussion that we had last time, you know, in digging down into what would happen in that meeting, there was sort of a procedural process. I think that Matt and Marta both kind of outlined what would happen in that meeting. And we do kind of need some part of that codified. And I think we were kind of directed to, as a team, like continue talking about this process in labor management, in our classified listening sessions, in our SPED listening sessions. And we do really feel like we have done that. We've done that work. I personally have been a union rep for about 5 years. I've been in multiple of those meetings in that 5 years. And I've watched our staff advocate for some of these safety guidelines in that time and advocate strongly for this, request this. I know we've talked about this quite a bit in labor management, and we've kind of been unable to make progress on this issue, which is why we're advocating so strongly for a process here. Our staff really do need to have some kind of avenue when they feel like they are in serious threat of physical harm because of student contact. And we really do need that codified somehow. Also, in our conversations last time we met, it seems like there was a desire from your team to kind of remove the conversation about it being particular to student contact. And I want to say, like, this is an uncomfortable conversation. It's uncomfortable for us too. But the reality is that this work impacts a large number of members of our bargaining unit. Anyone who works in a school directly with a student is going to be impacted by student behavior. We know that. And we don't usually, as a union, we don't usually advocate for things that are like specific to a small group of staff because we're for things that impact us all. But this has been a big enough issue that we really do need to advocate strongly for it. There's so many protections in this article for various safety issues that impact specific members of our bargaining unit. Heat and air quality and safety glasses on all these various things. And we really do feel like this is something that specifically needs to be addressed here as well. So in A3, the language that we are now proposing, which is a shift from our previously proposed language, is that if an employee reasonably believes that work with a specific student may result in serious physical harm, their immediate supervisor will work with them to hold a meeting within 2 work days to discuss a plan to ensure work safety. This meeting shall be held during paid time and may include union representation if requested by the employee, a review of the issues that require additional support to put the student and employee in a successful position, development of a plan of action toward ensuring worker safety, and a follow-up plan to employees working with the student sharing the plan for worker safety. So what we've removed from this is the list of specific staff who need to be included in the meeting. We did keep the part for union representation. Our union representatives are also HSD employees and they're bound by FERPA guidelines as well. Also, we have previously agreed upon language in L that union representatives are able to attend meetings with staff if they are injured due to student behavior. So we believe this would be a similar circumstance. So we're open to conversation about this language, but we don't see any reason why a union representative would not be bound by FERPA guidelines were they to attend a meeting here.
I'll say as an outside representative that it's not an employee of the district. I've done a ton of work in places like pharmacies where I have to sign HIPAA. You know, I definitely do regularly work in sensitive areas with access to sensitive information. And so, you know, it doesn't change the union's right to have an agent like myself or someone else have that kind of access, do that work, do that representation. And it also does not change the district's ability to say, okay, but also you have to be aware of certain regulations, guidelines that must be met. Anytime I've worked in a food service setting, I have to wear a hairnet, which kind of feels strange. But it's just the regulation. It has to be followed. And I do follow all those regulations when I do this work, and any union representative should.
Ask you a question about A3. Are you done?
Yeah.
Walking through. Up in that first paragraph, but I guess it's the whole thing. What's happening in the interim? So if I'm an employee and I say to my supervisor, here, I have these concerns, I want to hold a meeting, it's going to happen within 2 days. What's happening while we wait for that meeting to happen?
Well, my hope would be that as a supervisor, you would as soon as possible and not wait the full 2 days.
Mhm.
If your employee is in a serious risk of physical harm, you would do it as soon as possible. Our 2 day window was in response to, we need to have some kind of timeline because we know that there are supervisors who are like, okay, great, we'll have a meeting whenever, and it doesn't happen.
Mhm.
So we need some kind of timeline. But
Our initial proposal on this was that the member would be able to, in this situation, decline the work until the meeting, obviously.
Yeah.
We're moving to your position on this. We're open to a conversation on that. I think, given the conversations we've had, the situation exists until that meeting happens. I mean, I think, unless, we feel like, or the member feels like the work is potentially so harmful that it could risk death, they can't decline it. They're gonna have to keep working until there's a meeting to discuss how they're gonna move forward together.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's what I was getting at, is the person declining to serve that student while we're waiting for that meeting? Because that has been present in other iterations of the proposals, and I'm hearing that's not your current proposal, right?
it's not in our current.
Okay.
Yeah, we've moved back away from that, though, obviously the OSHA guidelines stand, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, we heard you on that piece.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
And are there other questions on anything?
I mean, how do you guys see like IEP team working into this? If it's a student who is on an IEP, it would seem like, and Wendy's gonna help me if I start mangling special ed law. I mean, if any bringing together folks in any discussion about additional like behavior supports or that sort of thing, would that not involve the IEP team, Wendy?
It could, or I guess then the question would just be, is this reading more like a meeting with that specific person to talk through what their specific supports are in that situation versus a
Supports
meeting
for the employee as opposed to.
to the student,
Intervention.
right? Because that would be in a different area. But it may be that we'll have to make something, but for this specific meeting, I'm hearing, is it really for that?
I think our intention is to give our members some agency around the support that they can get. And to be clear, a lot of that support is so that they can put the student in a position to succeed. So I think it's kind of situationally dependent. Some situations you might say, actually, this should just be an IEP meeting. Okay. And in other situations, it might be a very specific need around that staff member and the support that they need to get. I hope that makes some sense.
Well, I think that kind of changes what I'm reading then, because if you're talking about calling an IEP meeting, that is very different to me than calling a meeting to support the employee. I just want to make sure I understand.
No, this does not
Okay.
require an IEP meeting.
Okay,
This, and we've moved from the language where the member gets to call a meeting, to the member is going to work with their supervisor to do so. Now, if the supervisor says, actually, I think this should be an IEP meeting, that's fine by us,
Sure.
right?
okay,
That might be a
yeah, okay,
next step based on that, the meeting that you had with
yeah,
Yes.
okay. got it.
behavior support plan.
Because I do think once we bring in the parent and things like that, that could be really tricky and have some nuance, you guys know, nuances and things that we just have to be really thoughtful about.
Right, so I think when you look to D, sorry for interrupting, that's what the communication would be, like, okay, we're gonna have this little, mini meeting where we discuss, okay, we've got an issue, we're all aware of it. And then there's a plan toward ensuring worker safety for that particular worker, but then D is okay, now what are the next steps, whether that is something specific for helping the student reach success with their own plan, or just something where it's like, we're gonna have to shuffle our staffing until this is resolved, or just find another way to meet the need. So I think the kind of captures that we would like an avenue to be there for this, not just to be like, okay, we put out a little fire and, oh, now we'll wait till someone else says something over here.
So that's the, anybody else have questions on A3? Those are the questions.
B and C, we are in agreement, as well as B, E, F, G, H. In I3, we have added some language. So we had previous conversation about providing appropriate gear for inclement weather, and then we've just also added language for air quality events based on previous conversation about providing proper masks during air quality events.
I don't want to get stuck on this point, and maybe this sounds like an obvious question. For you, what's an air quality event?
Those are generally declared by DEQ
Uh,
according to the health index, so they have the different numbers related to particulates and things that might be in the air.
They're normally related to AQI.
yeah, I just didn't know if like, if it gets to 180, if it gets to 300, like what's our definition of air quality event? But it sounds like you're referring to something, I mean,
DEQ puts out guidelines for each
Yeah.
level, and so we don't want to tie your hands, we just want you to communicate those things like this, it's in this zone, so we're gonna provide you with this.
yeah.
Or,
Yeah, again, I don't want to get stuck on this point, but you know, like you get a number of different advisories, like, right, like unhealthy for sensitive groups. And then your next level up of advisories, like nobody go outside, you know, and so I'm just,
we're talking more about the nobody go outside because the sensitive individuals should work with their doctor to get a note for whatever accommodations they need.
okay,
Right, so those would be accommodations for sensitive individuals as opposed to if nobody should be outside. But the district feels that inside the building is the safest place for the students. Like, there's been discussions, I know in the past of a lot of the families may not have air filtration at home. Maybe it's safer for the kids to be in school, but that's not something we want to get in the middle of.
sure.
We just want the district to provide the proper equipment when it is unhelpful for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
we're distinguishing it from weather, like if there's a wildfire, that's not inclement weather, so
Agreed.
we just thought. Will be, you know, maybe make the umbrella wider if there is a more specific enforceable way to phrase it, then that was why we added it in. Since we were fiddling with other air quality pieces of this, we just thought that could go there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you wanted to reference the DEQ here, I don't know that we would find that. I mean, I certainly think when it comes to this clause, if DEQ were to say the AQI is so high that if you're going to be working outside, you should be doing so with a respirator.
Yeah.
That's what this clause would refer to.
Okay. Thanks.
So for I4, incorporating our previous conversation, we have shifted our language a bit about regarding PPE. Our team is still looking for some reasonable timeline in which PPE will be provided to employees. And that is what our language here is meant to capture. We did hear in the conversation last week that this is not currently an issue, providing PPE to employees who request it. But that we understand the district is not necessarily in control of shipping and availability of items. So, we've backed away from specific day timelines. But I'll read what we have here. Employees shall direct requests for safety equipment or personal protective equipment related to their assignment to their immediate supervisor. The immediate supervisor shall promptly evaluate the situation and approve or deny the request. If approved, requested equipment will be provided as soon as possible. If it is not available immediately, an approximate timeline for provision will be provided in writing. If denied, the immediate supervisor will do so in writing, and employees may appeal to the district risk manager or appropriate district level administrator. And then we've added I-5. Employees asked to perform tasks without OSHA required PPE may decline to perform such tasks until equipment has been provided. And we wanted to differentiate OSHA specific PPE because there are tasks that require PPE, which we as a team feel should not be performed without the PPE. Some of the examples that came up were like diaper changes without gloves. There's definitely some of our facilities crew that should not be performing tasks without specific PPE. And those are the kinds of examples where we don't want our staff performing tasks if they're not being provided the proper equipment. So we've added that back in, but with that qualifier that it's like OSHA required PPE. So this is meant to differentiate between like, the student specific requested PPE that we discussed here in the bargaining table.
It is worth us talking about, there's a disconnect. When we've been talking about this at the table, we as a team find your positions to be really pretty reasonable. But when we talk to our members, they don't seem to indicate to us that the way your team has been talking about these things is how it happens, right? So there is a disconnect between your intentions and then what's actually happening on the ground. That has to get bridged somehow. We're hoping to do that with this language. And it's important for you to know that, like, while you intend to put everyone in a position to succeed and get them the equipment that they need, some of our members are struggling to actually get that stuff, right? And that has to get fixed. And that could be a disconnect that's coming from between where we are and them on the ground. It could be specific work sites or supervisors, but we have to bridge that somehow.
Question, when you said you're struggling to get it, can you think of examples? Is that because they don't know where it's at? Is that because they asked for it and it hasn't been provided? Or what?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I think that there's a number of circumstances that have come about. Certainly, some of our members say, you know, when I ask for things, I can't get them. Definitely other members, I mean, if the problem were that when we talk to our members, they don't know that they can ask, we can fix that problem, right? So we're not trying to fix that problem in the contract. But for some of our members who are frustrated, who have asked multiple times to get what they need and still don't feel like they're getting it, or they're not getting it in anywhere near a timely way. When some of our members say to us, like, I am just going to go on Amazon and get what I need myself so that I can be in a position to succeed, that hurts us, and we know that you don't want that situation either.
And when we're talking about PPE, is what they need in order for them to do the job versus what it would be awesome to find. Right?
Yeah, we're thinking about this in terms of needs, not wants.
But I do know, like, there's a school that I checked in with that said that any students that need help with toileting, they have their parents send in the wipes, and that's fine, I guess, but I just don't know, like, if there aren't wipes in other schools or parents can't bring in their own wipes for helping with the toileting of students, then how is that need going to be met? Things like that, where it's like, maybe it's already being solved in a way that isn't exactly, like, do we know that those wipes are the right ones to use for the job? You know, like, maybe we just need to know that if that request is made to the immediate supervisor and there's nothing at the school, that there's a next step to know how the district would like certain things to be collected or ordered as time moves forward. And maybe that's fine, but that might not be equitable across schools. And I know we have examples of administrators who very swiftly get this thing solved or intervened, and that is encouraging, but then the folks that say, I really needed a bike sleeve and I was told just to wear thicker sweatshirts or whatever, that doesn't feel like, it's just like, gosh, it would be really great if I didn't have to wear my thick sweatshirt when it's hot outside, you know, like that kind of thing.
Thank you for the question.
And can I ask a question? Do you have an idea about how many centers are reported? Is it like 50? Is it 100? Is it 5? I'm just trying to gauge.
That's a great question. I don't know that we have like a really good gauge. I'll say to Amanda's point that like, we do talk to members who don't have a problem as well.
Yeah.
Like, so it's worth you knowing that. So to some degree, it could be site by site and, you know, I don't know that we have as robust an understanding of this as we would like, but we have a robust enough understanding to know that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah. It's more than one work site.
And I can say that some work sites do a great job. I know if I have body fluids on the bus that I need help cleaning up, some schools, they're like right there and they have everything they need and they're right there to help us. And other schools are kind of like, I don't know where that is. I don't know where we would keep that. You know, there's nobody here to help you with that. And so it's more that it be consistent throughout the district. It's not a district-wide problem, and there are some places that are totally on top of it. But we're trying to make it uniform for everybody in the contract that they know that they can say, hey, I need gloves in order to pick up this glass or clean up this vomit, and they know they're gonna have them.
Some of the specifics have been brought to labor management committee too, and we know them. We don't hide them.
Moving on to J, we are returning to, the full legal language here, as in our last proposal, and I won't spend a lot of time on this because we discussed it last time we met.
Though it was said at the table that being invited to these meetings is not in the law, and we found that to be patently false. So certainly reviewing the law, I think is going to be worthwhile endeavor for your team when you go into caucus here. We do think that's required, and we appreciate that part of the law.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look at that. I don't deal with special education angle of it as much as others in my firm. I know there's been an ongoing debate / dispute among the folks in my firm who do that work and OSCA attorneys and others. And that the position that I've been told our firm has been taking is that there is a right to provide input, but not necessarily a right to be in attendance at the meetings. So I will take a look at that statute again. I mean, when pushed, I'm going to believe folks who work in my firm and who are providing that legal advice, because it would be odd for me not to do so, right?
And our review is the statute, not necessarily, we didn't get into the administrative rules around the statute. So if there's something that we should be looking at, like an administrative rule that we haven't looked at, please let us know.
And I saw this one coming up and I just sent an email to somebody that said like, hey, can you give me the lowdown on this?
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I could point out that invited to attend and being in attendance are different things too. So like the meeting wouldn't need to be postponed around the schedule of the employee, but if the statutes and administrative rules do involve an invitation, that doesn't mean you can't have the meeting unless they're asking for outside what I've read.
Good, thank you. We want legal compliance too. I'm not gonna urge the district to take a position that I can't defend as being legal, but again, I know that this has been an ongoing conversation, not just in this district, but other places as well.
In K, we are mostly in agreement, for K5, this was to capture our conversation last time we met. We have proposed that the district shall work collaboratively with the union through the process of labor management to create and maintain a short form to track staff injuries not requiring medical care. On our end, we've done a little bit of work, on a form that we think might be the beginnings of this process, and we'd love to collaborate with you, Martha, and whoever else would be helpful to be in that process. But we do have something that, we'd love to look at in labor management and move forward on this. We do still think it is important to be tracking this. It's important that it be shared, not just, as a union, we're aware of all of these injuries. We want the district to also be aware. We think it's important that all this information be more eyes need to be on this problem so that we can tackle it more comprehensively and provide a safer workplace for our staff. So that's what this is meant to address, and we want to work collaboratively on this.
Can I jump in? I
Oh,
wanted,
yeah, yeah.
I wanted to say, at transportation, Carol has on the webpage a number of, we can write our bus up for safety issues on a bus reporting form. We have sped incident report forms that are not necessarily safety, but they're very short forms. We have a number of short forms for reporting different safety concerns like tree branches hitting the bus. And so Michelle from our team was sort of working on putting together a short form. We're not there yet, based on the things at transportation, because I shared those with Michelle and we're like, these are great. We should adapt these because they kind of get at the root of it, which is not spending 15 minutes filling out the long form when really it's just like there's a dangerous step or a tree whacked the bus or there's a tripping hazard or I got bit 15 times by the same student.
Yeah, we do think your transportation department knows how to do reportage at every level. And I think Carol even in a previous session kind of articulated it. It's like, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. So you know that the district has a demonstrated ability to kind of do this because the transportation department does it so well.
For L, we have a couple of changes here. So for L1, we have some optional language that an employee might want to take advantage of if injured, and due to student behavior. And this is mostly previously agreed upon language, but we do have an insertion here. And this language allows an employee to request a meeting with their supervisor to discuss the situation if they're injured. And essentially, we're thinking that this language would basically trigger the process that we have proposed in A3. The language that we've added is prior to being required to work with the individual who caused the injury. And we recognize that in probably most cases, employees are immediately ready to go back to working with the students that they're assigned to work with. But there are some cases when staff are severely injured, where they need a moment or they need to have a meeting and they need some assurance of their safety, where they're not ready to be immediately reassigned to work with that student one-on-one. And this is what this language is intended to capture, because we don't believe it's in the best interest for the worker or for the student for them to immediately be placed back together if they're not emotionally ready to do that. And so L1 gives the employee the ability to go, hey, I need to I need to connect with my supervisor and we need to take a minute to work out like what's gonna protect me before I go back to work with that student. To be clear, this doesn't mean that they're not going to be working at all. They can be reassigned to other tasks or reassigned to work with a different student. But just not to the individual who caused the injury. And this is, again, not in every situation, just if the employee says, hey, I need to do this.
Can I ask you a question about that before you move on? Is that
Yeah.
all right? I mean, I have trouble envisioning how this happens, because if that employee is like solely responsible for supervision of that student, and it's like, hey, this student kicked me, I don't want to work with them again until I can talk to my supervisor. They can't just leave the student standing there, right, with nobody doing that supervision. There may not be another adult ready to perform that supervision. So I really struggle to see, practically speaking, how that would work in a lot of situations where somebody could just say, I'm done with this kid, at least for now, until I can have a meeting. Have to continue providing supervision. They may be the only person available to do that. And I think, like, Wendy, I can't remember if it was here, if you were talking about times where you might be out to community even or something like that, or,
Maybe the person that's.
I mean, it's hard for me because you don't have a choice to provide that supervision. And so I really struggle with this one as I'm reading how it would play
Is
out.
there a threshold of injury at which you would say it's appropriate for a staff member to have a minute away from the student who's caused them injury?
I mean, I think it's a combination of factors, including whether another adult is in the vicinity or able to provide that alternate supervision, because I think that even if you're regrettably injured on some level by a student, you need to make sure that student is in a safe space and adequately supervised before you leave that area, even if you're injured. I think that's just gonna be a necessity.
I mean, I don't think we're advocating, hold on a second, I don't think we're advocating for leaving students unsupervised. But I also don't think we're saying that staff need to continue sustaining serious injuries indefinitely. So if they're saying, I feel unsafe and I feel emotionally unable to care for this student, I need to connect with my supervisor about this before I don't think we want staff to be in a position where they're saying, I'm unable emotionally or mentally to care for this student. I don't think we want them in that position either. That's not a safe position for staff or students either.
There are kind of two things we could consider here. I do want to give the floor to William here in a second, but one is, I think that this language kind of includes the idea that they're being returned to work. And so the word return could be something you consider there too, but when we're talking about this, at one level, if we have a member who's working alone with a student and that member is concussed and knocked unconscious, that is a situation where something needs to happen and happen immediately, right? So somewhere before that happens, we're in a place where something's got to happen, right? That's like the very extreme example. But then the other thing that, well, I'm going to open it up to William now at this point.
I understand what you're saying about leaving a student, but since the district got rid of the 3 levels of SEA, everybody's the same, so SWAT is not that hard to do. Okay, there's no specific job description saying I can't work with this student. So therefore, how I have seen it and how I have experienced it is one goes off before somebody comes in and covers until it all settles down. But I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying.
He's talking about like when you're out in community, right? Like a lot of our high schools, middle schools, and then our 18 to 21-year-old program would be out in the community, maybe supporting a student in a work experience or an internship or something like that. There's also just situations where a student is on their own, maybe in their own office area, being supported. And so there's different situations like that. The wording of this, I think, makes it sound like in the immediate moment. And maybe that wasn't the intention, is what I'm hearing is maybe that more like after that incident, then I'd like to have that meeting. And so, obviously, the situation you're talking about, the tagging out, that's common. We usually have a protocol, right? If something goes down out in the community, how do we manage that? Then who we call and what the steps are for that. I think that's common practice, but I think it's just wanting to sort out the wording of this piece to make sure that we're understanding what that point of change might be. Because nobody wants to leave students unattended. So I know that that's not the intention. So
That's
trying
right,
to figure
yeah.
that out.
Yeah, and that is not our intention here. We don't want our members to be in that situation where they have no choice but to do that, nor to have a choice to do that. Also be something that, we don't want to happen. This language doesn't really contemplate the community example, I think. So that's something to consider.
One other thought, I couldn't tell, William, if you were done or not.
Sorry.
No, I'm done, even in a community situation, there's still enough staff coming to switch. I've been on community many years, just switch.
But there's nowhere to go sometimes, right? Except to be on that community moment and to help with that group. So I just think we're just trying to clarify. I understand what you're saying about swapping out or switching in that moment. But you may still have to have your eyes on all the students, including that one, right? To make sure they get back safely.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm just making sure that we're really clear in the language, because I think that we want to make sure that for our intentions and our language match. Does that make sense?
Okay, can I get some clarification on it, and from Browning, don't want students alone, I understand, I don't want students alone for their safety and staff safety. But at the same time, you got a student who's here in chairs, tables, everything, grabbing weapons. You want that staff member to stay in there, if that student can possibly be severely injured. Like, I've seen rooms there where the student was in the room and even the deputy wouldn't go inside the room, but yet you're asking the staff to stay in the room, is that correct?
I mean, again, I don't know hard for me to envision the exact situation you're talking about. I guess what I'm saying is, I believe it's the first most important thing is to make sure that student is safe before all other steps, remedial actions.
Right, but if he's got a pair of scissors, you would expect a SCA to stay in there with that student.
I expect there
If
to be
he
some
starts
plan to account for that.
harm you, will you stay in there?
I expect there to be some plan to account for that.
Right,
Right.
but you know what I'm saying? It's like, you're asking them to put their life on the line with a kid with scissors in a classroom.
I guess it depends. If that student was threatening another student with scissors, I wouldn't expect a staff member to turn and run out of that room.
Right, but if there's a room clear and it's just you and a student. Say you're the SCA and the student has a knife, a pair of scissors.
I'm not sure why the student would have a knife in this scenario.
I said scissors, there's scissors in every classroom.
You said knife. But
And knives in every school, so.
I feel like you're mostly just trying to argue with me, so I don't.
No, I'm just curious, you're expecting the staff to stand in place of a violent student.
I'm expecting, again, the staff to make sure the student is in a safe space, not potentially harming themselves as well. My other question on this language is the way, and a lot of this language has been agreed to, but not taking into account what you've added, right?
Correct.
And so it starts to take on another flavor, I think, because the language that's agreed to is the heading is injury due to student behavior. The language itself then says when a bargaining unit employee is directly impacted by a student's behavior, and then it plays out from there. So other than the heading, it doesn't even contemplate that somebody's been injured on some level here. So I see that as problematic in the way that that language is constructed.
I see what you're saying. If you think that we're considering this in terms of injury, as per the heading. I think it would be a welcome amendment if you wanted clarity around that.
Yeah, and I think our addition includes injury, the statement of injury.
Yeah, this is a situation where something has happened and a long form report is being filled out, either immediately or soon after. Steps are being put in place immediately to either swap out, like we've been talking about, like a plan is already in place so that actions are being taken so that, because the injury may require the member be kind of removed from the work situation or as removed as possible. I mean, they're injured at this point, right? So
Our previous proposals said injury or trauma due to student behavior escalation cycle.
Mhm.
You guys changed that in your January 10th.
That might be why the
Which is why
language, yeah, is a little unclear.
Yeah, I think that the language or this section as we were drafting it wasn't involving, a refusal to work situation. So I think we were looking at it differently or writing the language differently for that reason.
Yeah, and to be clear, this isn't a refusal to work. A refusal to work. This is a request for a temporary reassignment from a specific student.
the language kind of assumes that there isn't a persistent, the language assumes that the member hasn't been injured and is in a persistent place of having to continue working, right? Like, the language assumes after the injury, there are things that are happening that now allow for a conversation with the supervisor. It doesn't contemplate the situation where a member is in the field and is injured, but still has to continue working despite that injury. That is a terrible situation that I don't even think we really talked about. I don't know that that's a situation that the district should really allow for. Right, you should have enough coverage and people available around so that if one person gets injured. I mean, yeah, that this isn't football, but in football, if you're injured, you're pulled off the field.
Yeah. No, I do hear that. I think one of the struggles with this and similar language or concept is there is a wide spectrum of what it means to be injured. TJ's giving me an example where someone's wielding a weapon. I could also have gotten kicked by a student. And maybe I say I'm injured. I don't want to work with this student again until I have a chance to have a meeting, et cetera, or I need time. There is a wide spectrum of what being injured could look like. And so I think sometimes we focus on the more extreme examples. And maybe I focus on the least extreme examples. I don't know, but it's a big spectrum. And that's why writing language like this is problematic, because what one person views as being injured, thereby allowing them to not work with this student until something else is done, another person might not even consider an injury per se.
So I guess the question we're trying to ask is what's gonna put our staff and students in a position to be successful? Because we don't want a situation where SEAs are traumatized and burnt out and quitting. We want to put them in a situation where they feel like when they need a moment, when they're like, I cannot go back in right now. I'm not okay. I can't go back in. I need to talk to my boss about this. That they have the avenue to do that. And that they're not being immediately put back into a situation where they know they're not okay. And that's where they are right now. Where they're like, okay, I'm gonna keep going back in. We've talked about this a lot at the bargaining table. I keep getting put back in, and now I'm not okay, and now I'm quitting. We have a shortage of SEAs all of the time in this district. We can never hire enough SEAs. We can't keep the SEAs that we hire. And this is a huge part of the reason why is because we're putting people in situations they're not emotionally equipped to handle. We're just doing it over and over and over and not giving them the space to breathe when they need it. And I really do hear that like, we don't have the person power to let people tap out when they need to, but we have to come up with some kind of solution here. So if this language isn't it, great. We'd love to have a counter proposal from your team that meets your needs and our needs. We're open to that. Let's have a conversation about it, but we need to have some kind of collaborative solution here, because us continuing to put staff in a situation where we know they're not feeling successful, where we're putting our staff and students in unsuccessful situations, staff are getting burnt out and they're leaving. And we're trying to make HSD a destination district where staff want to be, staff want to stay.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And when I hear Wendy and others talking about having kind of informal or more formalized systems, I guess, for being able to kind of tag somebody else to come in and help, I think that the district on a practical level does a lot of that. I think finding contract language that contemplates the entire spectrum of fact scenarios that could be in effect in any given situation is challenging. That's what I struggle with.
The language that you're asking for is somewhat soft and somewhat ambiguous, such as an appropriate amount of time to recover, right? If a student sort of kicks at me and makes contact with my shin, it might hurt for a few seconds, I'm probably over it. If a student throws a chair at me and causes a similar injury, that's a lot more. I might need a little bit longer if, to recover from that, not necessarily because of the pain or the level of injury, but because of the, how scary that is to have a chair thrown at me. And I think it's very hard to nail it down with language in the contract, which is why it says appropriate amount of time to recover, right? If a kid kicks me, my recovery time is probably like 10 seconds. If a kid throws a chair at me, I'm probably gonna get a huge adrenaline rush. And we talked about this on my bargaining team. I'm probably gonna need like half hour, 45 minutes. Like that is, I've had chairs thrown at me and not while working here, but it's very frightening and you get an adrenaline rush and you need some time to recover. So we're not trying to nail down every single situation, we're just trying to get something general in here that allows employees to sort of go, hey, I had a desk thrown at me and it, the injury was very minor, but I cannot work with the student for the next hour. So that's kind of where we're going at. It with like a kid, most of the time is not like life-threatening and everything.
Brian, your question around what is an injury, I think is a good one, because, we've come up with some examples here that are easy for us to answer that question, but there are going to be plenty where that's harder to answer question, right? We can talk about like, what is L subject to? What is an injury that's subject to this entire clause? I mean, in the district's last proposal, there's language here, we could ask that same question. What is that? What is the injury that rises to the level that that this language applies? I think it's a worthy question, because certainly while we're coming up with examples that are obvious that there's an injury, I can also come up with examples where it's obvious that there isn't an injury, and we wouldn't want our members to be in a position to be skirting work with a specific student for something that isn't a nothing event, right? That's not our intention. So I think your question is worthy around what is an injury.
I had a thought on Tiffany, but I hear the Will has.
The question that I have then is, what you're saying is different than what we're being taught in safety care. Okay, safety care is telling us if we get involved in something in town, you're out. Will be placed, and you get yourself together to be engaged if possible. So that's being taught to us.
Be added in if possible there. I mean, I think much of my concern was if there is not another adult there who's able to take over that supervisory responsibility, then I don't think that the employee can kind of discontinue that. So, you know, I don't know if possible in that sentence that maybe changed to, Tiffany, I do get what you're saying, that the appropriate allows flexibility across situations, but it's also at the same time, kind of has a double edge to it, because it also provides ambiguity in the sense that Nathaniel kind of brought up, I'll admit, one of our fears. Employee gets kicked and says, you know what? I need an appropriate amount of time, and that's 3 hours. So I can't work with this. And will every employee do that? No. Will the majority of employees do that? No. Will we get some people who do that? Yes. An organization this big, we experienced the full spectrum of reactions and behaviors, just the same way you guys sometimes say to us, like, we don't think most supervisors or administrators will do this, but some might. This is a big organization. We have a lot of employees. And it's kind of like attendance. Do most of our employees have great attendance? Yes. Do we have some employees who have challenges in that area? Yes, it's just inevitable. And so I worry with language like this, we will get people who will push that boundary and say, hey, an appropriate amount of time, that's pretty nebulous. And so for me, that means I need to take the afternoon off, or I know this isn't a refusal to work, it's a refusal to serve that student. But if one of the primary reasons for your job is to serve that student, then it's like saying, now find something else for me to do this afternoon and find somebody else to do the job I was going to be doing today. That's problematic for us. Again, whoever said, like, Gary, you might have, like, we don't have staff coming out of our ears, you know, so all these, you know, putting other people into assumed responsibilities is a daunting prospect to some degree for us. So
I think certainly this conversation is really good, and in your conversations and in your counter, you know, being thoughtful to understand the problem that we're looking to address here, I think is the thing. And if the direction you're going is you're gonna go look at safety care procedures, I mean, some of that's come up. I think codifying some of that might make sense. You know, some part of the if possible, when possible sort of language also could be applicable here. You know, we don't want to open the district's exposure up to grievance on this so wide that it's onerous, but we do need to put our members in a position to succeed when they're dealing with these problems.
Comment about extreme injury, like maybe even saying that it's those more extreme things that happen, because if you just get a little pinch and you're like, I'm not working with that kid, pinch me, that obviously, I mean, we can see that would be frustrating to stick around to have that happen again and again and again. If that kid is just, this is how I communicate, but we understand that behavior is communication. We're with them trying to read the cues and figure it out. But I feel like I would hope that a supervisor wouldn't have a whole bunch of extreme injuries happening at once, and the supervisor could be the one to be like, I'm gonna be with this student while you catch your breath, or I will find a dean, I will find someone who is a case manager, and you can sit with their small math group off to the side, you know, like even if it's just not returning to work with that individual alone, because I was in a parallel learning environment where I was just asked after being harmed to be that person that was right there with them. And I didn't mind to see out the day, but being able to talk to the supervisor and say, I cannot be with this student all day long. Like, I'm willing to fill the holes where we have no other coverage, but we need to start to dial back from me being the person that is right with this kid all day long, and it worked well. So if that is possible for it to be like, okay, in the moment, we do need to just make sure that this student has somebody attending to their needs and caring for the student safety, that's fine. But I knew that the next day it might be like, ooh, what can I do today? And that I didn't want to be opened up. And then we just tried to be in more situations where we weren't just behind our little partition alone, where there was. So I feel like if you want to figure out what the line might be for needing a little more discussion with someone who has the power to change your schedule. Whether that is the case manager in conjunction with the supervisor or not, then draft that language so we can see what we can provide you.
What are your thoughts on the sessions that have been created for that particular student?
What does the safety care protocol say? Like, I mean, as we're talking through this, like, this conversation is really good. We're gonna have to get into some specifics, like, what if I have been hired to work with a specific student? And then that student does something, maybe they didn't even intend to do, and I break my finger. What does the safety protocol say has to happen right there?
For safety care. I
Safety
mean, in that particular situation, I think it's not necessarily about safety care, that's about, injury, right? And so making sure that your supervisor knows, I think what safety care is gonna say is that you're gonna back away as much as you can if you're feeling like you're getting, if you're close enough to get a finger broken, that's probably too close, right? That proximity, so we're always gonna look at proximity. But I would think we'd kind of cross over into now, we're looking at injury, filling out that incident report.
What is the, what happens in the work?
Maybe I don't understand.
No, I
Sorry.
think you're getting at, I think you're getting at a piece of it, certainly,
Yeah.
like, but
Yeah.
what, like, at that work site, what then has to happen? So like, my finger is broken, I have to step away, I have to get a report filled out, but I'm the only person assigned to the student, so then what?
Yeah, so usually there's a walkie-talkie, somebody's gonna walk in, and it sounds like we have some folks who have that, I'm sure before, you're gonna call your person. Who's on duty in that moment, and then they're gonna swap out with you in that moment. That's usually the typical protocol.
Okay,
Most people have it, we call it like a response schedule, so then kind of each hour who's the response.
I think that's helpful to hear, I mean, I think if we go from that example to a place where I don't know if my finger has been broken, it might have just been jammed, it really hurts, right? We're still gonna kind of go through those steps, right? Like, I still need to back up and walk and talkie, get some support. And I think in that situation, which is maybe a little bit more clear than some other vague ones we come up with, and we should maybe come up with some vague ones too. In that situation, I'd want to discuss with my supervisor. I mean, if that's a situation where something just happened and the student didn't, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna be like, all right, I can go back once I feel 100%. Whereas in another situation, it might be like, I feel really threatened by this person and I need some support and a plan with my supervisor, or it's a different situation. The intent can kind of make these situations different, I think, too, sometimes, right?
Yeah, I just want to make one distinction, say, I think we're talking about safety care, but we really mean like a safety plan. And so safety care is really ultimately preventative and how to work with students, that have different behavior challenges or things like that. So that, I just want to make sure, I think in this case, we're really looking at our safety plan and our safety. So sometimes they get confused because of the name. So.
No, but the language, safety care to safety plan, they're was right side by side. So when I broke my foot, whenever I checked out, so whatever happened. They moved people around. A lot of classrooms, I'll speak on the secondary. We follow these students, we're not assigned. They'll hire, if it gets to that point where this one individual student needs a one-on-one. But normally they will hire or get a process. Okay. So I think the water's getting muddy because the makeup of what we are dealing with is different. It's not one size fit all throughout the district. And that's the problem. Like, I can tell you that listening to some of my coworkers on the elementary level, they're gonna be dead. As opposed to us in the high school. So it's all different. And I don't know how to modify the language to encompass that.
But I think that's the challenge, and what I was bringing up is you were trying to write contract language that can cover the full range of incidents from kindergartner to post, 19 to 21-year-old, even potentially, and everything from they're wielding scissors to they kick somebody. I mean, it's a wide range of very fact-specific situations. So it's hard to write language that contemplates all of those different situations. That's what we're struggling with.
Yeah, that is the challenge.
I mean, if somebody is injured to the point of needing medical care, they need to go get medical care and not be continuing to perform that job while they go get medical care. Like, we're not arguing that, right? So it's that band of situations that don't rise to that level and are probably not so minimal that no reasonable person could claim they needed time or to be relieved of duty. So how do we account for that band? I think it's our challenge.
The need for medical care might be something we contemplate as far as where the language goes on it. I mean, yeah,
We've
yeah,
contemplated it,
yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think the last scenario that we talk about as a team needing to avoid are situations where everybody has had an interaction with a student and now does not want to serve that student anymore, and somebody has to, right? And so that's a concern for us too. Because we don't get to say that we're not going to serve a student anymore. So.
But that concern goes to the team. We have a student that it's hard to work with, and we get like from staff. That's when the team comes in. That's, okay, what do we do? And I've seen it where, students move or various situations, but when you rise to that level, that calls into the whole team. Sit down and say, we have a problem. And how are you going to handle this problem?
Agreed. It relies on somebody or some bodies continuing to be willing to work with that student, right?
Well, I think William's right on as far as like what we're intending with a lot of this language. What William just said is exactly what we're proposing in A3. And that's when someone reasonably believes that work with a specific student may result in serious physical harm. Hey, you're not alone, right? We're gonna get the team to work on this. Let's work on this as a team.
Yeah.
You have a team, even if you felt like something's a really serious situation alone, all of a sudden with a team, you might start to feel like this is manageable now.
Yeah.
Right? Similarly in L, the team is, hey, I've been now injured. And the team is, I gotta talk to my supervisor before, like, we gotta figure out what we're doing here. I've now been injured, so before I'm gonna be required to work with that person again, that injured me, I've gotta get in on a team level with my supervisor. And that supervisor may want to include other folks too in that situation, but this language doesn't require it, right? But I think what William just said is exactly it. We don't want our members to feel alone. We want them to have the agency to say, look, we got a team with this.
I don't disagree with that part. Honestly, I didn't feel like we were that far off from each other as we were going through A. I started having more concerns as we hit L, and honestly, it starts to feel like it has overlap with A in the way you're describing it. Like,
It does.
I've been injured, I have concerns about working with that student in the future. That sort of feels like if an employee reasonably believes that work with a specific student may result in serious physical harm. So if it's forward looking, so it feels like A. And then for me, where I get hung up mostly is the idea that somebody opts out. Because in A, you guys had moved away from that language. That was my question, is the person declining to do the work as you're contemplating in A, and you said no. Now, when we get to L, at least on some level, the person is declining to do the work. And that's what makes it, I think, a little more
With that
difficult.
specific student,
With that
until they can
specific
check in with their supervisor
And that's after an injury, so
after an injury.
if you imagine a situation where we have two SEAs working with a student. One SEA is injured, needing medical attention. The other SEA could say, I need to get the team together via A3, right? But the SEA who is injured now gets to meet with their supervisor before they're required to work with that. That's kind of how we were imagining this work. Making it more clear, I do think, we would welcome.
Yeah.
As far as L is supposed to be an injury that is making, that is, maybe a medical seeking level injury. Having some idea of what level of injury it is, I think would be helpful to have that clarity in the contract.
But like, let's think about it from this also triggers potentially, L3, if I'm going out on leave. If I'm injured and I go out on leave and then I come back and I'm immediately working with a student who injured me that required me to go out on workers' compensation. I would love the opportunity to touch base with my supervisor and be like, hey, I've been out for a bit. I had potentially a traumatic experience before I went out. I want to touch base, know what's happened since I've been gone, what has been in place for my return, if I'm gonna go back and work with that student again. These are all just like basic supports to be provided to the employees so that they know they're stepping back again into a situation where they're gonna be successful with their student. They're gonna go back to that same student interaction.
In an NCA, and I have been here for 20 years. And I can tell you that I have been in every one of the situations and scenarios that we have talked about. And I also can tell you that SEAs want language of protection in our contract. And it's better to have something here codified than nothing. And if you do nothing, then you're sending the message to district that you do not care about the SEAs who are on the floor or on the battlefield, for the SEAs that are working. I know talking to SEAs, they want more than what we put in this contract. This is just to begin, so please don't push it aside. Help us, work with us and find the correct words that help us to feel protected.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's why I ask these questions, even though they are hard conversations. I mean, that's the purpose of me asking these questions is to, one, try and figure out what the root need is. And number two, is there a way that we can accommodate that while still making sure that we're not gumming up the works in other ways, right?
And I want you to know too, TJ wasn't trying to argue with you. He gave a real scenario. I've been in that scenario. And I will tell you right now that I don't think there's any SEA that I know of that's gonna leave a student unsupervised and uncared for because I got kicked in the leg. Okay, we're in this job because we love our students. I don't know anyone who would do that. But I also know that in that situation, when I have a student who is wielding scissors and coming at me, I'm gonna make sure he's safe, but by golly, I'm gonna make sure I'm safe.
That's what I would expect, nothing less. And you said the key part of it that I was arguing for, you're also gonna be making sure that student is safe to the degree possible. And again, they're fact specific. I think a kindergartner coming at you with scissors is different than a 12, 13, 14-year-old, engaging in the same behavior. So that's why it's hard for me to respond to kind of hypotheticals. What if a student has scissors? Well, Are they the rounded point scissors? Are they a big pair of scissors? Is this a 5-year-old? Is this a 15-year-old? You know, I think it's very nuanced. And your reaction and response probably depends on all of those factors combined.
Absolutely. And with all due respect, Brand, Ryan, sorry. We haven't been in this situation.
No, what I have done, though, is try to administer contract language that's being pushed and pulled from different, oftentimes extreme positions. And so that's the lens that I bring. You're right, I haven't been. Would I know how to react in that situation? Likely not. But again, I'm trying to figure out how contract language is going to account for those situations in a way that's not grievance after grievance after grievance, and it's not, you know, the contract language being meaningless either. So
Okay, so our request to you as a district is please work with us. Please give us some language that gives us some protection as well as a student.
thank you.
I also just feel like I need to say, because we're talking about a spectrum of behavior that our staff will work in elementary behavior can still be very dangerous
Sure.
and very impactful to staff.
Yeah.
So I don't want to
No
discount
doubt.
that as a staff member who worked in elementary and wasn't even an SEA. I myself have been in very dangerous situations with students. So let's not say that like our elementary staff like have it easy because those kids are little. Those kids can be very large and pose some very dangerous situations
Sure.
for staff as well.
And also, most of our language in this entire article contemplates the staff reaching out to their supervisor for support.
Mhm.
Like even if the child is 6 years old, if they have, you know, if they're coming at me with scissors, I would like to fix that, right? I want to have a good working relationship with that student. I want to get support from my supervisor, and what I'm hearing from around the district is, like, I know I have supervisors accessible to me that I can address any concern immediately. Some places, people are told toughen up, you know, just deal with it. That's what you were hired for, and not really allowed any opportunity to get any kind of support. In terms of developing a safety plan or getting resources or collaborating with someone else. And that's really, again, I know I keep going back to this thing of like, it's inconsistent throughout the district, which is why I think we need to have something in the contract. Because staff at one school are saying, yeah, it's great. I just, you know, I go in, the principal will like talk to this and then we'll do a thing. Basically what we're asking for in the contract, and then other places, it's like, we're told, oh, you know, he's not kicking anyone else, so it must be something you're doing, you just need to toughen up, stuff like that, that's not supportive, and we're just trying to get something that everybody feels like they are afforded the same procedures as everyone else.
So I feel like I want to underscore what Nathaniel said briefly, since, as a SPED assistant in the past, I found that there were things I knew and that I had experience with from other jobs that I had had, other things that I had done. So sometimes I had an instinct, but I do want to follow what safety care would want or what the administrator would want in a more extreme situation. So I feel like Nathaniel's saying, before being required to work, before being assigned to work with that student again, or sent back, returned, like, I feel like that's what we're saying, and it doesn't even, it's not even baked in that the employee could refuse it. It's saying they may ask for guidance before going back in for the next moment they're supposed to interact with that student. So if that's the way the language direction should go, I mean, we're just asking for that moment to say, this is out of my depth, it is above my pay grade, this is serious. I was hurt, and I don't want to just go back in and say, kick me again. Do you have some words I could use? Did someone else have some strategies that have worked better with this student? And so often it's it's folks that are just new hires, some that are just like, this is my first job out of college, and they might not have the instincts to know what to do with a curveball situation. And we don't want them to just be like, well, I just got the ice pack out of my lunch bag and, you know, like we walked over to get it and the student's just still like, you know, whispering awful things to me and I don't have the skills to go back in. So I feel like that's more what we're asking for, like just that, not even necessarily needing to tap out. If that supervisor will come and talk to the employee right where they are and give them a little coaching, that's better than nothing. And that might take a moment, not like within 33 seconds, we will need the person to be there to advise. But if there is a gap between, then this fits in between. It fits like after the incident, before you have to go in again. So you have things in your bag of tricks ready to go. So that's what we'd like to have codified so that those that have question marks aren't like, well, I guess I'll just do my best. Because all of us in our jobs, whatever our experience, we're just practicing on real people every day. Like no matter your pay grade, but we want to do things that will lead to safety for staff and success for students.
Sure.
Period.
Yeah, I don't disagree that that's ideal. I mean, I do worry about in the moment, supervisors not in the building because that happens a fair amount. You've had an incident with a student, it's not an injury that required medical care. Now, do we have staff around that can come in and provide supervision in the event that you don't want to be doing that right now and your supervisor's not here to have that conversation? And now we've got to account for this student in some way, you know, I mean, those are the situations that I worry about when I read the language.
Well,
When it's not all there to work out kind of ideally how we would like it to work out in the situation.
Maybe a designee then,
yeah,
because there are other people in the buildings. We've got student success coaches, counselors. Maybe it's just saying like,
Yeah.
I can get some guidance from a level up from where I am. And sometimes it might be your coworker that knows what to do, but you're gonna need to talk to the case manager who knows like, oh, well, this is a safe person for that student who might have some tips and tricks. And so it would be great if you guys could talk about what's been successful before you have to go in, since you won't see that student for a couple more hours or until tomorrow, you know, it's that stopping point to make a plan for success that would have made a big difference for me when I was new on the job, so.
I think a lot of times just having the conversation with your supervisor is what provides you the space to be, but like, just to dump it for a minute and let them help you get back into where you need to be in the right space to work with it. So whether it's your immediate supervisor or the person who's standing in the place, like, I need to be able to decompress for a second on what just happened before I have to jump back in with the student. And I get that if you put it here after providing for their safety and making sure that the situation is secured, then having this thing go into place, then you're not saying, hey, you can jump off the bus and let the thing go off by itself, but Tiffany, don't do that.
Yeah.
So,
We're not abandoning busloads of students. That's not happening, not happening.
I think our intent around this did not include a decline to work in the moment.
I don't know if I ever actually got to L2, but
We started talking about it.
I think we were talking about L. This has been a great conversation on L.
yeah, but that was intending to codify a discussion that we had about good practices that some of our supervisors here at the bargaining table discussed. Which was that when employees suffer injury, that they are provided an appropriate time to recover. And I think, Teresa, you mentioned like letting somebody go get Starbucks or, you know, take a break. Ray, you talked about, yeah, going to take a break. And we left it intentionally ambiguous because the situations are ambiguous. The amount of time needed is ambiguous, but there is some amount of time. And so that was supervisor discretion really in situational need. Moving on, and we're in agreement in O. The only language here in O that we're not in agreement yet is, that required training should be conducted during paid contract time or compensated via extended contract term. We just added that because in public safety, our employees there work a variety of schedules, so we want to make sure that everybody's getting paid for their training. We
I
don't
feel like that
anticipate
language
will be an
is
issue.
somewhere else in the contract, isn't it?
Article 21, section 8.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the robust conversation. So.
Yeah.
We are passing around Article 28 contract accounts. Brian, since you weren't here last time, I'm gonna summarize some of what we said last time in this discussion. We had, when we were doing our work on this article, we went back and listened to really the conversation we all had at this table around this article. And there was a really robust conversation that was actually very helpful for us when we were looking to come back to you with our counter. And in that conversation, it was suggested, I think it was suggested by you, Brian, though I can't remember, that D get kind of split up into two pieces. One piece being work that is within the assignment of current employees, and the other one that is not. And so that's exactly what we sought to do. In our last proposal, the district came back and changed the word "or." So what we had was the district may subcontract work for an urgent, unexpected, or temporary need, which ordinarily would be performed by or within the assignment of current employees. And then that was changed to.
You had and.
Oh, sorry, and, thank you. That and was changed to or. And while that makes sense that that was in your counter to us, also it had really wide. The meaning change there was huge, right? But we're kind of willing to go down that path, but then there was a few things about that. So here in our counter, we've got the district may subcontract work for an urgent and unexpected or temporary need, which ordinarily would be performed by or within the assignment of current employees. And then because this temporary gets us really nervous, we just, in our conversations, we're like, what is temporary? We know temporary could also potentially include chronic. We hate chronic. We do want some amount of definition around what temporary is. In our conversations, we got really nervous because temporary could end up being so expansive that A, B, and C were never used. We want the district to go through the A, B, and C process. We want to be clear and have mutuality with you about when that does need to happen. And so we're proposing a temporary need shall be no more than 60 days in a school year. We're obviously willing to have a conversation about what you think a temporary need is and what maybe differing walls around the word temporary you would be interested in.
Okay, great. I don't think I have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're at 1:30. We've got a planned caucus from 1:15 to 2.
Yeah, do you want to take at least like something of just a quick personal needs sort of break and then, we come back and then Michelle obviously is here, so then we could be able to present at that point.
Yeah, do you feel like, 1:45?
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say 15 minutes roughly, so whatever.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You ready for us to go ahead and move forward?
Yes, please, take it away.
All right, well, as you can see, Michelle's here. She's going to handle Article 10 and 12 proposals from us. Take it away, Michelle.
Right, thanks everyone, and I do apologize for being a little bit late today. Crazy day, but I'm really glad that I was able to catch what I did from the article and its conversation, article 28. So thanks for working with us on both of those articles. For compensation, Article 10 today, I know you guys are kind of probably sad, but I don't have a slide deck prepared. I think most of the detail from the January 28th slide deck still applies as we continue to kind of move towards what is the end game of this process for us. So, with that said, I think for the record, I would like to just touch on a few things that are included elsewhere in the agreement that also have financial impacts that we've talked about. Just because from the budget perspective, we do have to take that into consideration, even though that's not necessarily directly in Article 10. So we have, see here, we had a holiday, Juneteenth for in 11-month employees, and we talked about ways to mitigate that without cost, but it does have a potential cost. There was an increase in vacation days, and folks can access them sooner and with less restrictions around those days. And so for those, the cost of those would be the value of the work of that time, because it's very valuable. You guys all know what you contribute, how valuable that is. And then we had there were personal leave addition. We have some pay differentials that we're looking at as well. There was essential employee stipend to the $150 to help people prepare to be available when maybe other staff are needed to implement weather or other things. So it's kind of just sprinkled throughout the agreement. There are several other things that are impactful financially, and I just always want to make sure we're reflecting on those as well. So I think we'll go ahead and distribute Article 10 and 12. All along, we kind of treated these as a package together, and I think you guys recognize that as well. In Article 10 for compensation, we are really at the limit in terms of what you will see, what is available. There is, I do want to remind everyone too about the pay study, which is an obligation that we have to do. But it does have an impact of movement, so it's going to increase costs. And we estimated about half of our staff would receive an additional step to that study and adjustment starting next year and in the following year. So knowing that there's potential movement for staff that are in the middle, new hires will be placed appropriately in alignment with the new language that we have in our placement. But there's a top 20%, and everyone else will receive some level of movement to anticipate. So with that all being said, knowing that that is in addition to this offering, we have again 3.5% general salary increase in year 1, which is the current year. That is retroactive back to July 1st for 10 and for all employees. 4.75 for year 2, which is next year, and 4.5 beyond that. This is the same general salary increases as HEA has realized, and we came to an agreement there. So we're hoping that will be recognized. Comparatively to the current year agreement or prior CBA, we had 3%, 3%, and 3%, and $50 a month towards insurance, and that was after a year of bargaining. So when you think about it in terms of comparison, this is a much richer
package than what we've been able to provide in the past. Knowing that our budget outlook for the upcoming biennium isn't steady, stable, or necessarily positive at this time. And I think you'll see that if you track the budget development meetings that we have made at the board level. Even at the governor's recommended budget, there will be reductions needed. So I just want folks to be able to anchor back that was shared early on while we're working through this process. I don't want anyone to be surprised by that later. We have our, for folks not eligible, item 2, for a step increase due to being at the top of the salary schedule, we'll receive a retention bonus of $500 at the completion of each of the 3 contract years, and the years are identified here, so that would be something that we've shared with you. We'd like to revisit every morning. And the rest, I think, is the same as what we presented before. And the differential there, we have, okay, so the differential went from swing shift from 20 cents to 40 cents per hour. And the night shift went, beginning in 24-25 was 80 cents, and then it has like this graduated $1 and then $1.20 respectively. Section H talks about the placement that we've been working through together as a full team. We talked a lot about the shifts and logic around the approach to this as you move into next year, so that folks will be placed correctly at the beginning of the year instead of later. Thank you, Leon. I know I went fairly quickly, but I think there's very little, I don't think there are any other changes throughout. Article 12 remains the same. We've been the same on Article 12 for a while, but because it's so tightly connected to Article 10, in case there was some type of shift that happened, we have to transfer that all together. So it's just been kind of left open, but we do have a copy with today's date.
I was going to ask, should this be considered a package together? Thank you. And I have a question in Article 10, H3C, just for clarity, I think I know the answer. H3C only applies to H3, is that correct? Not all of H.
Correct.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. Anyone have questions?
Just to note too, on Article 12, the insurance offered here is more than what was offered to HEA. I don't know if you guys compare Pepsi's or whatever, but it is $50 a month increase in the first year. And it's effective upon ratification, but it's still gonna set that level higher for the next, which I think was the desired.
I have a question. Is it more overall or more of an increase?
It's more overall.
Okay,
And yeah.
thank you.
Thank you for that. Hearing no other questions, I think we will move into caucus.
Yeah, that sounds like the right way to go. Do you want to set preliminary, at least like a check-in time or something like that, or do you just want to text?
I think we can text, I think, would love to come back at 3, that gives us an hour, it's a little over an hour.
Okay.
What time do you?
Well, yeah, I mean, that, we have more language
Yeah.
to sort through. Not that what your decision making, not that it's a less important article, just less language.
Yeah.
So
Right,
we'll need at least still 3, I can guarantee you that.
okay, let's try for 3, but certainly be in touch, we'll make adjustments as needed.
Okay.
Fine. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good.
That's a favorite attempt.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe 20.
I didn't run up the stairs this time, so.
I know.
Yeah, that one. We have one addition. We've adopted your language, but in the final sentence of E, we've said more than 60 consecutive days in a school year. That's consistent with our definition, our substitute definition anyway, from the definition section. That is our only difference in our two proposals.
Thank you for that. Brain is processing through it. I'm sure we'll talk about it in caucus. Right? Yeah, let's keep moving.
All right. Looks like this one's gone around. So, obviously more moving parts in this one than Article 28. The difficult article to bargain. I think we had a constructive conversation, but I also think that conversation demonstrates some of the challenges with this article. So we are trying to come your way. Trying to do that in a way. I talked a lot about having contract language that we could administer that being a challenge. So that's definitely been one of the things we've had in mind. A1 and A2, we've been in agreement. A3, we've added, there's wording differences between our two proposals that I'll highlight for you. And I think our intent also, we felt like there was a lot of overlap with that section L. We've tried to bring section L together into this one in some ways, so that this covers a variety of situations. So we've, you can read for yourself, but I'll read it for the sake of it. An employee reasonably believes that work with a specific student, we said with a specific student situation has resulted or may result in serious physical harm. So there's the linkage to what you proposed in L that we're trying to achieve here. This would be both if you're concerned that it may result in harm or it has resulted in harm already. Both of those are scenarios where, first of all, we think they will notify their immediate supervisor. That piece was missing. The immediate supervisor may not be aware of what happened, so they will notify their immediate supervisor, and then starts to pick up with your language again. Their immediate supervisor will work with them to hold a meeting within, we said 3 work days instead of 2, trying to give ourselves, enough time there while not dragging it out too long, trying to find that magic kind of spot. Just discuss a plan to ensure work safety, that was your language, then that last sentence, this meeting shall be held during paid time, we added or extended contract, it may be that it happens after the workday, but that's better than waiting until the next day to pull people together, so. I think paid time, obviously, and may include. We agree union representation if requested by the employee. We trust your union representatives to be confidential in those situations. We framed B a little bit different to match the language with above, a review of a review of the issues with a specific student situation that has resulted or may result in serious physical harm. I mean, basically, all you're saying in B is we're gonna review the situation, what happened or what we're concerned might happen. Not like C, just saying development of a plan of action was sufficient. I mean, I think that the piece about ensure work safety is embedded up in that first paragraph of 3. When it talks about to discuss a plan to ensure work safety. 4, we see that, D, we see the communication being a little bit different, follow-up communication, certainly with the impacted employee. And then we said, and other employees working with the student as deemed necessary by the immediate supervisor. If this is an issue that's coming up in only one particular setting, it's not seeming to repeat in other settings, it may not be necessary to share as widely. So that's our A3. I'm going to pause there to see if there are questions. And I'll call on folks on my team to help with those questions.
Brandon, I have a question.
Yeah.
In 3D, a follow-up communication. Is it fair to say that you mean as deemed necessary, that would be to other
Yes.
employees? It wouldn't be as deemed
Correct.
necessary. So it would be like as if there was a comma after to the impacted employee, then and other employees working with supervisor deemed necessary, comma, by the immediate supervisor.
That's our intent, correct? Yeah, I agree that your construction of that sentence would do a better job of accomplishing. Other questions I can answer. And if you don't have them now, but they come to you by the time we walk through this article, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think, go ahead and keep moving, and as we think of them, we might have to come back.
Okay. I think as Kira, as you said, when you presented, we have no differences in B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I think it's I that we have getting some pieces. 2, we added or during air quality events. To I3. I believe we adopted your proposed language in the first paragraph of 4.
There's a typo.
Oh, where's it at?
It says, the second sentence, there's a W in front of the shall.
Oh, thanks.
It's just a typo.
Thank you. I believe 4A is as you propose. I believe 4B is as you proposed. We didn't feel like 5 was necessary because when we read that, we read you to be saying when the OSHA requires PPE to be used, we'll do that. We felt like that was really inherent in that lead into this whole article. The district will comply with all workplace safety requirements of state and federal law and regulations. So if OSHA says you'll have this equipment to do this job, I feel like number 1, we're legally bound to do that, but number 2, we've committed to that already up in A. So we didn't include that.
So you committed to provide it, but if you don't provide it, then how does the employee know that they have a right to refuse the work?
Well, I mean, I think if OSHA says that we'll provide, a certain ventilator for applying chemicals or something, and we don't, we're in violation of OSHA. I would expect an OSHA complaint. I mean, I'd expect hopefully the employee to say like, hey, shouldn't I be having this piece of equipment here?
Right.
Yeah, and otherwise we're not in compliance with OSHA.
Right. So I guess how can we signal that to our employees that they have that right to have that conversation with you without directing them every single time to all of those OSHA regulations, because that's a huge burden on them to do all of that research and read through all of that, because we get those,
Sure.
we have those conversations with them.
Do you feel like even your language would require them to do that? Because even as you drafted it, it talks about without OSHA required PPE. So I feel like an employee would still have to go through that exercise because
Potentially, I think there's a little bit more of them being able to go like, okay, if I don't have the things that I need, there might be, I need to start having a conversation with somebody about like, I don't have to do this task. I don't have the specific equipment that I need
Yeah.
to keep me safe when I'm doing this task.
yeah, we talked about trying to be more proactive, quite honestly, about being upfront about what OSHA requires for certain tasks. One of them, we heard the concern being like with diapering with a student, and I think Wendy, you were.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about is because now we have our SCA onboarding training that we've been doing. And so just making sure to include that so that the new employees are really aware of what is necessary for that toileting piece, which I think we could really highlight. So that way, because you want them to use the proper PPE, right, in those situations. I mean, I think everybody's in agreement there. So making it just more explicit in the training so that they're clear about it. I think that's an easy piece for us to add.
And there may be common things, tasks that are done in custodial or maintenance where they're reoccurring. We know what OSHA says we're supposed to have for PPE and other safety equipment and trying to be like more explicit with that. I think it'll be more the one-offs that cause the most question. Like this is an unusual task that I'm doing or something, what's the PPE requirement for that? I think those will require a little bit of reviewing what OSHA says. Other questions on that piece? Again, if you think of them while I'm going. Jay, we modified the language. I do have the legal guidance paper that our firm is putting out. I'll share it with you. I meant to do that during our caucus because somebody sent it to me. Our language says and may be invited to and compensated for attending meetings. That is one possibility. It does happen. We don't see that it's always a mandate. So, and I will provide that to you. And again, I know it's been something that's been a subject of discussion amongst practitioners. But
What is the legal guidance paper? Where's that from?
that's from others in my firm that do this work.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it's like a memo.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, we'd certainly love to review that.
yeah, I'll send it to you.
And I mean, it's worth me asking, there are some situations where we have members, we feel like, it would really help the student if they were invited. And then other situations where, it might not make sense. Where is the district land on this? With a may be invited to, it's kind of discretionary on the district's part. What situations would may become the district is inviting you?
Yeah, Wendy, can you cover that or
Yeah,
a building
so-
administrator also?
I mean, I think, some situations where Kara is gonna really provide specific information or be able to answer questions that maybe has or parents in particular has, that could be, a lot of times you can gather that ahead of time. And make sure that you've asked the right questions, and sometimes you can, and that means you have a follow-up meeting and include that Kara, and so we have done that before. I just was at a meeting. So I think maybe is really dependent, just like we choose whether an OT should be there, or whether an SLP, right? Like I think each member of the team, we are really purposeful and intentional with whether we're inviting them or not, because we want to make sure that their expertise is honored and that we are not overwhelming our families us the report at that time. So we're really, thoughtful about that. There's just so many scenarios with IEPs that I think it's hard to say absolutely this or absolutely that, because there are so many different ways that an IEP needs to be.
I had a question last time and, neither, Mr. Hungerford nor you were present to answer it. And it has to do with notice, so, if they shall be consulted and the law says, including being invited to, that would let them know when the meeting is happening, so there'd be a deadline for them to provide input and whatever they want to provide. How are people supposed to know when those meetings are happening if if they don't have access to know when the meetings are?
I mean, I think that there needs to be a process where we're gathering information and input, and that would be before the date of the IEP. So I think it would be making sure that you're in conversation with your case manager.
Okay, so how are people supposed to find out who the case manager is?
I hope that we're having conversations about which student is case managed by the within a school. Are you talking about,
So we have transportation
I'm
assistants who work
right,
with students for several hours every day, and we don't know who the case managers are, and you're not consulted, and it's something that I have a particular interest in fixing. It seems to me that the way the law is written, it says including being invited to, which would give us notice, hey, there's a meeting coming up. I don't believe, well, I don't want to speak for anyone else. Being invited to would at least give us notice of when the meeting's coming up to be able to provide input.
yeah, and I think that we do, I know that Caroline just talked about this, we need a more systematic involved in that. And so I do think getting some kind of notice, I'm not sure if in that invitation is the best way, because I think there's more than just I you probably want to get put into, that's my guess. But, or have things that you want to talk to people about, right, that you're seeing during the day, that would be important. So I think that a more systematic way, I do think that is.
I think it's really the behavior support plans that we're in general more interested in, unless there's a communication piece of the IEP that we need to know on the bus, such as the student is deaf or uses a tablet to communicate, those things we need to know.
Right.
And again, like not to get too involved in the IEP process where y'all track like specific education goals is not really our interest in my department. There are other SEAs that I've talked to who also have no idea when the IEP meetings are coming up. They're like, I work with the student like 4 hours a day, one-on-one with the student 4 hours a day, and nobody's talking to me about, you know, things that are working, things that aren't working. So it's not just my department that doesn't have access to provide input to these things. And so,
Well, I think the input is valuable, and I know that we want to make a good system for that. I'm not sure that being invited to the IEP is always the right vehicle. Depending on the students.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but I want to say that that is important. So, and that we're really talking about how can we make it more systematic as we're getting this along.
Let me ask this is kind of a bigger picture question. In general with J, I mean, there's some language here that's already agreed to, like the shall be consulted language, we're talking some about that. Is the district considering that, like, this is a change, things are, you're having to put more pieces in place to make sure more folks are consulted with? Okay,
Absolutely.
that's
And I think
helpful to
that's
know.
where I'm saying, like, we're trying to systematize it more, make sure, like, we have, I don't know. We've thrown out some ideas just to make it so that you guys can have some good input, but also get information. So that it's not as informal, it's more set in stone.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you.
I don't believe we had any differences on K. Oh, yeah, we did, sorry. K5 is your language.
Thank you for that. I'll say we really appreciate that and some of the work on this.
But you said that you already have one already in development, so we're expecting more projects.
Yeah, we will absolutely work in collaboration with you on this and thank you.
L, like I was saying in the intro, we tried to blend most of the proposal of L into A. We talked a little bit about, do we even need L as it currently reads in light of A, but we didn't want to delete language we'd already agreed to. We feel like we now have the vehicle to have the meeting. There is union representation provided. I think obviously what's not in your L that showing up in our A is the idea of people not being required to work. I think for us, we talked about the fact if somebody has a medical event or they require medical intervention, they need to go get that medical treatment. Then they're going to be leaving the work site. And that's a specific type of a situation. I think we have like informal or practical ways of, we've talked about kind of people tagging out or in. For us, they kind of defy contract language because it's dependent. How many people do we have available to help supervise? You know, what are the services we're providing at that time? So for us, that was challenging with contract language. We're hoping to cover it with A. I believe that the last piece is O, where we have adopted your language. The last thing I would say, and then obviously if you have questions, you know, we've had a lot of conversation on this article and questions about, you know, does the district value staff safety? You know, do we take this issue seriously? We absolutely do. And I think it's reflected in the fact that the amount of new language, I know we're still in disagreement on some pieces, but the amount of new language that we're in agreement on adding to this article is significant. I mean, it's likely the most language we've added to any article in this contract. So I feel like, do we have issues where we're still debating them? Yeah, but have we shown a commitment to making this a more robust article? I also think definitely just based on the volume of language that's been.
I will acknowledge real collaborative progress today, and thank you.
Sure. Okay, that's Article 19.
We are passing back a package to you, Article 10 and 12, compensation and insurance.
Good.
Work out somehow. And I do have. Okay, then.
So big picture here, we're obviously up against some difficult choices. We want to acknowledge, you know, the district seeking to align the compensation offer with what's been given to license and potentially what admin are receiving as well. In our conversations, that's challenging for us because we understand 1/4 percentage point is much more for administrators and certainly also more for our licensed coworkers than it is for classified. The last few years of inflation have been certainly very rough on our members. We know that it's been rough on everyone, but we have a significant portion of our members who are routinely going to food banks and so we're certainly looking to catch up from, the inflationary problem. And some of that, is kind of national picture. Locally, we feel like our costs are kind of higher than in some other markets as well. So that's been a big part of our conversation. In this package, we're moving on insurance into a place that is more affordable for the district in the first year. Our proposal now is that you just stay at the current contribution level of $1,375 for the 24-25 school year. That provides a little bit more financial relief for the district right now. And we understand that right now is kind of the most important time financially for the district. We've been throughout this process pretty willing to make some allowances for the difficult situation the district is in right now financially. In compensation, we've been aligned at 3.5% for the first year. We're keeping our proposal at 5% for the second year and 5% for the third year. These are close to the numbers that you've proposed. Again, our members make less than licensed and far less than administrators. And so in order for our members to not have to go to food banks, we do need a little bit more of a raise. In the rest of the compensation article, we are agreeing to the last language you proposed. That is in A2. We're agreeing to the retention bonus of $500 being limited out to the contract term. In H, we're agreeing to all of these provisions as well. Missing a piece? I think that's it, yeah.
Unless there's anything we missed.
Unless there's something we missed, and let us know.
No, I don't think that there's any other differences.
On the insurance, so I noticed that although the first year did not change, the second year from the current amount, the second year has a $100 jump per month. So I mean, it stays at the higher rate, so to speak.
That's
So
correct.
that savings is just in the first year. This is still going to compound in cost for year two.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we are, looking to save the district some money where we can, and ensure that our members can get a raise that, comes close to honoring the kind of work that they do and keeping up with the costs that they're experiencing. We did have conversations about that, Michelle. I appreciate that question. We kind of thought, well, if we can give the district some relief right now in the current year, we should do so. Especially if that helps our members get raises that honor their work. And then in the next 2 years, keeping it where the proposals have been. Yeah.
I think the one clarification I would add is, for us, is it important to have the units getting the same or similar increases? Yes. But that's not the sole basis for our proposal. It's not just license got this, so this is what we should provide. And I think we've shown that in the sense, like, license didn't get the $500 longevity piece. We proposed it in this contract. We proposed different insurance numbers. So for us, it's trying to be good stewards of the finances and looking out in the future. And I hear what you're saying about comparative costs, but we also look at it as comparative, kind of like percentage of the district's budget. Like classified employee payroll makes up X% of the overall district's budget. License makes up X%. If you take any one of those pieces of the pie and increase them, significantly more, then you're gonna have problems, even though the absolute dollar value of a percent might be different. You're still increasing your overall costs by a higher percentage. for that portion of your budget, right? And so I think what's been a concern for us is getting to a space where our expenditures on classified employees now have grown to beyond their makeup in the budget and now need to be reduced. You know, I mean, I think we don't want to bargain ourselves into layoff, which we've seen so many of our neighbors are in that spot, right? I know you guys see the same thing. So you see the Westlands, Lake Oswego, Port Republic, Salem guys are all cutting workforce. So that's what we stay up.
Yeah, I think we totally understand that. We also don't want layoffs. I think we've worked really hard to ensure that the current year budget that you're in with as much leeway from us as possible. And then we are going to be good partners with you in lobbying the legislature for additional funding for future budgetary years. Also with dropping enrollment, there may be opportunities around just that and attrition that make it so that you're able to avoid layoffs. We're hopeful that a combination of those things end up being the case. It's like trying to hit multiple moving targets while riding on the back of a horse. It's not really possible to do, but one thing we do know is that our members are in a place of financial hurt right now, and in a worse place now than they were 3 years ago.
Yeah, which is hard, because it's largely external factors, right? I mean, the last settlement and then what's on the table for this settlement exceed what have historically been offered and agreed to if you look back at the course of the last 10 contract settlements, right? So it is hard, because I get it, the inflation rate is a component of it. For the district, there's far greater outlay for salary for both licensed and classified than we've traditionally had in the past without a corresponding increase in funding. I think that's the difference.
I want to say too, I think that we tried to structure it where we're saving the district the most money the first year to give you time to plan ahead, and also the experience that the current people have in this district. I really fear people leaving because of a pay vacuum, where if all the surrounding areas, the same job, you make so much more, people are going to leave and we're going to lose all that training, all that expertise, the bonding with the students. It's difficult for me to contemplate like saving a little bit of money on staff salaries so that they can have a living wage, but we're gonna lose people that are at the top end of the pay scale. But those are the people with the most experience, right? So they're gonna take that experience and that training and all that and go somewhere else. That's a big fear of mine, because I think I don't want to put classified staff in the position where they feel like their only choice is to leave this district because the pay is so low.
Yeah.
And I know that you're working as hard as you can to try to wrestle things into shape, so that you can give us the biggest raise possible. I do trust that. I just, my children go to school here and they have received an excellent education, and I think a lot of that has to do with how great the people are, and I would just hate to see people feel like they had no choice in order to keep feeding their families and paying their bills to maybe look for work outside the district. I guess that's part of why, as much as I hate to keep like coming back and begging for more money, I feel like I have to, because it's the only thing that's really gonna work for some of our employees that are on the lower end of the pay scale, that are only making like $1 or $2 more than minimum wage.
So we definitely are interested in retention as well. I don't know, I guess it depends on what districts you're looking at. I push back a little bit about whether the pay in Hillsborough is so low. I think those were your words, so low compared to neighboring school districts, because I'm not sure I agree with that.
That's fair.
So I think that this district does pay competitively Especially in the light that it, in light of the fact that it's missing a revenue stream that other districts might have that, local option.
To Tiffany's point, I think a better way of saying it is like, this proposal from us is what we see as the minimum to ensure that the district is a destination district, which has been a shared interest, and we do want that to be the case. We have had to go to the table between normal negotiations on certain classifications of employees because of a challenge to hiring or retaining certain folks. We don't want the district to be in that situation if we can help you avoid that. And we do want to maintain the level of excellence that's happening currently.
Great. Questions?
Electric caucus.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We had a stated end time at 4, and it is a board meeting day, which I know you know that. I have a different board meeting this evening that I have to appear at virtually, so we're pretty tied to our end time. But maybe it'd be a good time just to talk just for a few minutes and kind of figure out where we're at and where we go.
Certainly.
15 minutes, does that work? Can we come back and that does push us a little bit beyond 4, but. Does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
So we are going to go ahead and schedule another meeting. And that would be March 4th. And we will let you know by a place.
Yeah.
Where we're gonna do that.
As much as both parties want to reach a settlement as quickly as possible, we have to do it right. So we will.
Thinking half day, all day.
As much time as we can have, and hold in the location.
Figuring out a location, scheduling a whole day, and hopefully it's not needed.
Just want to thank our members online for joining us again today. And we will see you again on March 4th. And again, we hope that will be our last bargaining day. So thanks again for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.